I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Jim Meyer. I'm a senior field engineer at Intrepid. I do have a fair bit of experience in the automotive industry. I worked for a major OEM for a good portion of my career. So I do, been around. I've been at Intrepid now for about 4 years. And what we're going to be talking about today is multiple module flashing. And one caveat that didn't occur to me before is we're talking about simultaneous module flashing, right? Not sequential multiple. Though that is also part of the package, but really focused on doing multiple ECUs at the same time. All right, we'll jump right in. I hope. All right, I can't click to advance. That's always fun. Hold this out here, just page down. Okay, so just a quick overview. We're going to be going over kind of basically two different kind of use cases really for using for multiple ECU flashing. And then we're going to talk about a couple of different, just high level, different methods that we use for, for setting up your flasher. And then we're going to go over some just general features, and then we'll go through an example of just kind of walk through the steps you need to do to set this up in the Vehicle Spy software. All right, so we're going to start off talking about multiple ECUs on a single bus. I've got just a little picture here. This is kind of your case where you've got your bus interface connected to the vehicle on a single CAN channel. With Vehicle Spy running. A lot of cases, this is through a central gateway module where you're then able to talk to multiple buses at the same time. Has been one of our common use cases, and let that do the routing where we're just talking to that gateway on a single channel and then letting it do the routing behind there. So, all right, so this is just the view of our ECU Flash Manager, and really what I wanted to emphasize here is the fact that we're setting up different archives, right? So archives for different modules. So I've got 7 different archives set up here, and we handle up to 16, depending on they're up to 15, kind of depending on the vehicle architecture. It's not really limited by our software, but oftentimes what the vehicle will support in terms of simultaneous ECUs. So we've been kind of working around 15 is one of the major OEMs we work with. That's the capability of their gateway module. So what we have here is basically a number of ECUs set up with different archives for different modules, all on the same bus here. So same network, lots of different archives. So a few notes on that. Really to be able to do this on a single bus, it is requirement that the modules you're flashing all have different arbitration IDs, so diagnostic addresses. If you're trying to do the same device on the same network, you'd have conflicts with not knowing which of those modules is responding. So when we're using this kind of paradigm here, it's important that they all be different. So your common use case, right, is a vehicle, right? When you're flashing a vehicle, there's only one ECM in the vehicle, one TCM, that sort of thing. So you can flash all of those simultaneously in the vehicle, or a good large number of them. One of the things we also support is grouping. So if you want to set up 30 flashes, you can actually group them 15 at a time. One of the real common uses of this grouping is maybe if you have to flash that gateway module. The first thing you probably want to do is flash the gateway module, because you can't flash the gateway while you're trying to have it monitor maintain the traffic through to the ECUs behind it. So a lot of times you put that gateway module into group 1, and then put a batch of 15 into group 2, and maybe another batch of 15 modules into group 3. So that allows us to really help optimize things into a seamless operation. One of the other real advantages to our system is that it's all accessible and scriptable via our function block interaction. So, which gives you access, to transmit messages, all kinds of things. So if there's a special case scenario where maybe a module, needs to have something extra done to it before you can flash it, this really gives you an environment to do that if that's not part of the existing archive. So it's really, this also gives us, the ability to where we can, build custom tools around this, right? We're going to show you that in a little bit. But an example of this, working with one of the major manufacturers, they have a system that will build archives for a vehicle. So this system, because it's so scriptable, they wrote a script then that takes that set of archives and the descriptions and basically just automatically loads it and configures everything for the vehicle automatically. So that's one of the real strengths of having this, and it's in the same environment that you use in Vehicle Spy for doing diagnostics, for doing any of the other scriptable things. So it lets you really integrate these, and also do things like write them out to a file. So this lets you take and write a summary file out that can then be uploaded to the internet, and you can track all of this, kind of make it a full online system that way. Right, so here's an example of a script that was written using this system, where basically, this is set up to do things in groups and kind of monitor. And this is where it takes that kind of script for the vehicle and takes all that information, just auto loads up the ECUs into groups and sets them up. So, and this is really kind of designed around that 15 ECU capability, where it's going to load the ECU name, and then it has, and this is on our graphical panel. If you guys aren't familiar with that, this is our custom scripted page that we use in Vehicle Spy. So this then, will show us the status, and then we got progress bars and a pass/fail LED. So, and this is all, custom designed user interface to do that. Then you'll also see here at the bottom, this is scripted to show, the process of the groups. So you'll actually, it automatically updates, shows the groups at the top as they're going, and then shows you kind of where you're at in the big scheme of things. Then has the ability to output a summary file. So, if you've got, someone who's doing this, that you can upload the results and kind of use an analysis system to make sure that everything did succeed, that the person doing this, was actually watching the screen while it was happening, that sort of thing. So another thing, let's see. So in this really, we're going to talk about kind of how we set these archives up too, but all of that is all configurable through the same interface, whether it's, specifying the ARB-IDs, whether you're doing part 2 or not, some of that things from some of the other archive files. All right, so the other common use case for doing multiple ECU flashing then is kind of a little different. It's usually where you have a large number of what I would call loose ECUs, and you need to flash them all. This is pretty common at plants, where you might have, you're in the early stages of production, they've got 10,000 ECUs sitting in a plant, and something happens where they all need new software, right? And this is where we get into having to now go through and manually flash all those new software. So this is usually a case where all those ECUs are the same. So you really don't have the ability to put them all on a single CAN bus because they all will share a common diagnostic address. So in this case, what we have the capability to do is set this up to put each one of them on a different CAN bus, right? So that way you can isolate them and know which one you're talking to based on which channel or which CAN channel you're working with. And we do, so we've got an example here showing the Rad Galaxy. One of the things we support in addition to CAN flashing is we also support this on Ethernet. So we'll do DoIP flashing, or we can do the socket adapter SoAd flashing. So we have both of those capabilities too. And the Galaxy is a great example here. A lot of modules do need a CAN connection to wake them up. So you would use the available CAN channels on the Galaxy then to wake the module up, and then you can initiate that flashing over the Ethernet channels. So a couple of notes here. The Galaxy would support 8 CAN channels, but we do have, the Ion goes all the way up to 16. We have tested this with 16 modules. That works. Fire 2 supports 8. And we also have, the Red, hopefully you guys got a chance to check out downstairs, the Neovia Red 2-8 and the Fire 3s. So the Fire 3 that would have support for 16 channels also, which is kind of our next target here. All right, just kind of looking at an example setup of what loose ECU module flashing would look like. This is where we have kind of the similar setup before. We have archives loaded here, but in this case, all of these archives are the same archive, right? So you're going to flash the same software into all the modules. But you'll notice here under the network, these are all different. So we're configuring that, same module on different networks. Now you'll also notice here, this is where we have the configuration screen. This is where we set up the ECU addresses. Whether you want to flash on CAN FD or not, what your packet data, your transmit data length is in this, kind of standard use like FD with 64-bit payloads. And we also have the option here where this is where a grouping happens. It's really as simple as just selecting the modules, enabling group execution, and typing the group number in. It'll go through them in the order that you select. It'll do group 1 and group 2 in that order. We'll go through that and just kind of we'll walk through that in a moment here. So a few notes on loose ECUs on multiple buses. So like we mentioned, if you're putting a module each on its own dedicated bus, they don't have to be different, right? They can all be the same. And an important note that we do support CAN and Ethernet over the socket adapter or diagnostics over IP. There's only pretty limited number of modules with direct flash over DoIP. In my experience, most of them are using SoAd, but a few do. And again, the same environment. It's really, the same the scriptable environment where you can write function blocks to integrate this, to start it, to write a special function block to check the part number is correct before it starts, or maybe check the serial number, pull the serial number from the module, and then through the scripting you can write that to a text file. One of the examples I worked with was at a plant where they were, where they had to do 1,000 of these or a couple thousand of these modules, and they were able to like pull the serial number, read the part number before the flash, and then read the part number after the flash, and write that all to a file. Then they had just like a Google Docs script running in the background that would just accumulate that data into a single Google document. So he was able to like real time, while he had several people out of the plant flashing, he could like real time see, hey, how fast are they getting through them? Did any of them not pick up a new serial number after their flash? That sort of thing. So really easy way to integrate this and kind of with other systems, right? Make this a complete ecosystem. All right, so a couple of things. So we've talked a lot about the flasher. Then we're going to spend a little time talking about kind of the source for the, how do you set up your module for flashing? So in the first one we're going to discuss here is our Flash Designer, and this is kind of our catch-all tool. So this is an internal tool in Vehicle Spy that lets you design and build your own flash sequence. So this, from reading the binary file, which section of memory to write it to, that sort of thing. So we have some existing ones that are already accessible. So it lets you, we have some examples of this. You don't always have to start from scratch on these, depending on who you're working with. But then again, we support the same kind of CAN or the communication protocols, CAN, CAN-FD, and Ethernet, both flavors, right? Socket adapter and DoIP. So here is an example of our ECU Flash Designer, where we have kind of the layout. So basically what we do is you come through and it's just, you add an ECU, and then we go through and add the programming steps. So you can see in this example, we start with the diagnostic session control, do your control DTC setting, usually to disable DTCs, start tester present, that sort of thing. So we're just kind of building that sequence that you would do for a module up front. And then as we get, including this also includes our security. So you can call into your OEM's ECU, your security unlock DLL for the seed and key is all present here. And then as we get into the file transfer stuff from a binary file, then you would do the blocks in these steps. So kind of a nice graphical user interface. You add the steps and build this from scratch. And this really would support any, to our knowledge, it supports really any ECU, right? So you can build this, whatever script you need to do this. And we do have a fair bit of experience doing that. So we've done a lot of ECUs with that interface. Now we also support the DPS Archive in Vehicle Spy, and this is one I do have a lot of direct experience with, where you can take an existing DPS archive and flash that. And we have kind of the same suite of protocols supported for DPS archives, CAN-FD, and really a big one is, I guess, we're the only tool I know of that will do the socket adapter flashing to an ECU with the DPS archive. So that is something we just introduced this year. I believe it was early this year. We started doing socket SoAd flashing with DPS archives. So just kind of a look. We also have a nice tool here for viewing those DPS archives. So if you have one of these that you want to flash, this can be very helpful to kind of look at the steps. So you can see this looks a lot very similar to our other tool. It's just that these steps are already built in a binary file to where you can now view and see what the flashing process is. Where it's doing the security access, the counter, all the kind of steps that are written into that file, in addition to, just being able to load that up. So a few other features. So the ISO14229 Security. So we fully support secure unlock, which is required for most modules. For doing this, and just kind of a quick overview of that process, right? That is where you're doing the process of requesting seed, and then the ECU would then would send you that seed, right? That you then pass off to that manufacturer specific DLL that then goes out and gets a key. Some of them do it internally, some of them need an internet connection for this. but we support both, and then that key gets passed back into the corresponding service. The 27 passes that back to unlock the ECU. So one of the other things we have is, in addition, after you've got this all set up, we have the ability. So kind of this is your process for setting up an ECU Flash and Vehicle Spy. You load in your security, DLL, Flash files, then we can have the added step of being able to build this into an executable. So if you've got a large number of people flashing ECUs, you don't need a full Vehicle Spy license. For the people who are just running the same script over and over, you can compile that to a Vehicle Spy executable, and then purchase a much less expensive license for just that. Hey, I'm going to click the Flash ECUs button, right? So significant cost savings there, and really, very comparable set of I guess tools accessible to that executable. It just doesn't give you the ability to design to do that design work. One of the other pieces that we also support is remote ECU flashing. So this is where you can take that same setup file and actually upload it as a compiled Wi-Fi file up to our wireless Neovi server, and then push that down to your remote vehicles. So this is a tool I haven't had as much experience with yet, but I know we've done this for several other OEMs where we have this in place where you can do the remote flashing. So a lot of times this requires kind of a specific script and maybe a sequence that the customer needs to do to initiate this flashing, right? Where that's all scriptable in our environment too. So you can kind of design your own. When do you want it to flash and how do you know when it's safe to do it? That sort of thing. Okay, so what I have kind of for the last here is we're just going to walk through this process of loading in a DPS archive and kind of setting everything up for just one. You just then repeat that. So we'll kind of jump into this here, where we are going to take, go to first of all, going to the tools, right? Which, as you can see here, is under embedded tools, then ECU Flashing. And we're going to use the ECU Flash Manager. The Flash Designer is where you would, use that GUI to build a new setup, and then the Flash Manager is where you would load those setups and kind of manage flashing those into the ECU. So we're going to go through the example of the Flash Manager with the DPS archive, because it's one of those cases where that sequence is already pre-built for you. So our first step here is where we're going to go on the left here, where we're going to go down to this plus button in the ECU Flash Manager. Click that plus button and then choose whether we're going to do a DPS archive or generic flasher. In this case, we're going to use a DPS archive. So we hit that plus, choose DPS archive. That brings up a window, just a file selection window, and it's going to provide a filter here for the type of file you would select. In this case, because we chose a DPS archive, that is going to be a .zip file. One note is it will let you select any zip file, so you do want to be a little careful that you select a valid archive. It won't actually flash, but it doesn't give you the warning until it goes to try to flash. So just a little bit of caution there. So after you then select the archive you want to flash, the next thing it is going to do is prompt you for which network you want to flash on. And really there's two general options that we use is CAN or Ethernet, as I've mentioned before. And it's basically you just need to then double click on the network that you want to select for that ECU. And you go through this for each ECU and watch. So we can do usually either high-speed CAN for vehicle flashing. If you're doing multiple loops, you would set that same module up for each network that you have on your device. And then also on the Ethernet side, usually that is one of our 2-wire automotive Ethernet channels. There is the ability to use some. We have done a few where you might do this on a regular Ethernet channel and then use a media converter. That's also an option too, or you might use standard Ethernet. All right, so once we have now added our ECU, so we've selected the ECU, we've added the network. In the example I chose HSCAN. So now that's in the system here, and we see these options. So these are the options that we fill out to really set up that ECU for flashing. Now, one of the things that we've kind of focused on for our ECU flasher is that it be kind of independent. I don't want to have to load a full database for my ECU to be able to flash it. So we've kind of designed this so that it's kind of its independent own little feature. So all you really need is the information here and you're ready to flash. So if you're doing, if you're going to flash in the VIN, you need to enter the VIN. Of course, if you uncheck that, if you're not going to do that step, you wouldn't need that. The security code in this use case is really not used because we are using a DLL certificate, and those are kind of pre-configured based on the type of archive you select. For the DPS archive, we kind of know what security type to look for, whereas the other ones let you kind of manually configure which DLL to use. So, and then of course you use, it is configured for use through a CGM. So you can configure the CGM. There is a couple of functions it does. I believe we put the CGM in the CAN-FD mode for all traffic, and then kind of the module specific stuff here, which is the bulk of the flashing we're doing is through CAN-FD, and then of course just the request and response ID and functional ID. That module we do tester present on functional ID, and then the rest of it is sent on to the module specific responses. So then once you've got all this configured, now one thing I will say, most of this is pretty standard, UDS stuff, right? You just need to know the module ID and put it in the right spot. For the most part, it's pretty CAN. So maybe not as complex as it looks here if you're not familiar with diagnostics and UDS. And then once you've got this configured, there's really kind of two controls. You can just flash this individual module if you like here with the start button. That will go ahead and start just that module flashing. Or if you want to, start your whole sequence. So if you have several modules loaded in several groups, this start all button will then go ahead and launch those in that sequence. So we start with group 1 and group 2, that sort of thing, and do them as specified by groups. One of the other kind of nice features from this is the ability to do include in package. So whether you're compiling an executable or saving a BS3 zip, this lets you embed those archive files in those two packages. So you don't need to have those archives on your computer, just need to transfer this setup and let that go. All right, and this is kind of what it looks like when it's running. This is a simpler screen where you just have the one, but you do then get the state. So this will say flashing, and it progresses through the different states, and we get a progress bar as it moves through. So you'll see it's progressed through the steps, and then this progress bar, fills from left to right to fill that in. And you also see either the step number from a DPS job or the description of what's set up in a custom ECU flashing. You'll see these, kind of the specific steps it's going through as it's flashing that ECU.